r/AskReddit. Serious friends of sociopaths/psychopaths. What was your most uncomfortable moment with them? I dated someone who I now believe is a sociopath. The most uncomfortable thing while we were dating was that he would constantly whisper things in my ear in public, in earshot of other people, like, "Do you think I look hot right now? Or do you think I'm cool?" And the first few times I thought he was joking, so I laughed, and he'd get angry. He wanted a serious answer. He wanted me to tell him how much I wanted to jump his bones right there in front of all of our friends while they were watching and listening. I'd get lectured afterwards like, "You know, you really insulted me personally when you laughed at me in front of everyone." He could also cry on cue to get what he wanted, and as soon as he got what he wanted, it would instantly switch off, and he'd turn very serious and tell me what a horrible person I was. The instant emotional switches are disarming. When he broke up with me, I went from being his favorite person in the world to instantly at the very bottom of his shit list. He laughed when I cried on multiple occasions, calling me ridiculous. What's very alarming about people like him is how many people they can get on their side with their charm. None of his current friends know anything about his behavior behind closed doors. And they are all new people. All the people who caught on when we were dating are gone from his life. He has convinced his new friends that I'm a psychopath because I tried to tell others what happened, so whenever I say anything about what a creep he is, I get brigaded by the new people who are now being manipulated. Also, he is completely dead in the face and eyes until you interact with him, and then it's like he becomes animated. My uncle. We found out things in bits and pieces. My dad and he worked together. He got my dad fired by saying all sorts of lies to their boss, and then pretended to be the white knight by offering him a job in another country where he's living. Money was tight back then, and we were in a lot of debt, so dad agreed. He took him there, gave him work, but also made him a slave to his wife and kids who also lived there. Dad was expected to cook food, wash the dishes, clean up the dining table after uncle's family ate, and then eat himself. Yeesh. Dad didn't tell us until much later. According to the rules set by uncle, he wasn't to contact us often, should mind his own damn business, even if his daughter didn't turn up home all night, and keep his mouth shut about work. Dad was miserable there, and we couldn't do much because, again, that job was a welcome relief to us. Uncle, meanwhile, would come every night to our home, have breakfast and dinner that my mom generously cooked because his family was abroad, while bitching about my dad in front of us. One day I had finally reached my breaking point and I started crying because I felt horrible for dad, who was trying so hard to make things right for us. Uncle just sat opposite to me smiling. Got him smiling. Will never forget that psycho grin on his face. Days later, dad suddenly turned up unannounced at home. Turns out he'd been dumped by uncle to our city without prior notice. Dad had no guts to tell us what happened. We realized uncle was a psychopath later. He'd routinely mentally torture people and enjoy their misery while pretending to offer sympathies and help. He's in a powerful spot, so he offers his victims jobs. Once they accept, he makes them entirely dependent on him. He'd then put his victims under even more psychological stress, be it threatening to cut off ties or getting them fired if they disagreed with him. My dad was really messed up for days. He'd swing from utter despair to not speaking for days to extreme violence to absolutely broken. Got beaten up a bit for trying to calm him down. Dad could finally regain his mental sanity after we cut off all ties to that uncle. Last we heard, he wants to contact my dad because they are brothers and people realized what a piece of shit he is, so they avoid him too. Dad's like, oh hell no. I'm friends with a legit psychopath. I'm on mobile, so I'll be brief. Not all psychopaths are necessarily a danger to society in the sense of physical violence, crazy or unreasonable. G is a close friend of mine. He is of shallow moral character, devious, manipulative, ready to screw anyone out of money and capable of physical violence when pressed. He's scary. That said, he is deeply intelligent, quick with a laugh, non-judging. You could talk to this guy about anything. He just doesn't care. He's a lot of fun to talk to or party with because he is so unique. I trust him to be himself. He has never screwed me over except I seemed to lose $sign when I went into business with him. The most creepy he's been and he knows I feel this way, is when we talk about moralistic standards for society. Essentially, he thinks the weak and stupid, but who makes that call? Should be essentially weeded out, put on farms or something, shot. He gives no fucks about anyone else, save for a select few. He's not racist or sexist. He just thinks he's better than others based on smarts, looks, ability. He feels the dumb should not be allowed to thrive. Creepy, huh? I remember one conversation we had when drunk I couldn't finish because we weren't getting anywhere with it. He won't change. He doesn't empathize. That said, he is a reasonable person. He's not gonna put his doc and non-profiting thoughts into action. He's not interested. He likes money and doesn't mind ripping people off. A businessman. Cunning. He exists for profit. That said, he'd help me out of any kind of a sticky situation, mostly for the fun of it. He's bored a lot and understands he needs others. He likes me cause I'm interesting and feels him on his level. We speak openly about his psychopathy because I'm so interested in it. We've been friends for 7 years, were close for 3 years, before he moved to another city. I stayed at his house in 2016 for a couple weeks. Feel free to amma. This is a moment I still think about from time to time, though it's nowhere near as bad as some others in this thread. When I was a kid, this girl had hit me, kicked me, randomly lied to get me in trouble, and tried to shut me in rooms to keep me from getting help when she attacked me on numerous occasions. But none of that really scared me after a while. Yes, she was aggressive, but I was about the same size, so I could fight back. But there was this one time. We were getting along fine that day. She was being pleasant and fun. We were playing games together. It was a good day. She told me earlier that she'd been sharpening sticks to a point when she was bored, which for some reason didn't set off any alarms in my kid brain. After a while we ended up playing with some of these sticks. Can't remember what we were doing. I think we were just using them to draw and dig a little in the dirt. Time passed. Everything was fine. Two normal kids. Then she looked over at me and something was just different. I don't know what it was, but something felt very wrong and suddenly I was afraid. The second she started moving towards me, I got up and ran. She chased me with her sharpened stick, and I'm 100% confident she was going to stab me with it. Now it was still a stick. Looking back, she probably couldn't have done serious damage with it. But it was entirely possible she could have given me some nasty cuts, and no doubt she'd have done it if she caught me. While she'd never gone after me with a weapon before that day, she had hurt other people with scissors in the past. In the end her parents stopped her, and her aggression had just sort of turned off. Like a switch. Back to regular kid. I think that's the part that really bothered me. The way she went from being totally normal to the scariest she'd ever been, and then back, just like that. So this is going to be a little long, but I'm 99% sure my boyfriend's brother is an undiagnosed psychopath. His sense of humor and interests are dark as hell. Not haha dead baby jokes dark. He used to torture and kill small animals as a child, which a textbook early sign for a serial killer. He attempted to drown my boyfriend as a child and regularly beat him, and my sister. They've supposedly since made amends. All of them got therapy, but I just feel like everyone enables him and has never really had a proper conversation about what he's done because they don't want to make him feel bad, so he relapses. He's obsessed with this channel about guns and is weirdly obsessed with death. Something in his eyes sometimes just also looks empty. He also says a lot of racist and classist shit. I'm black, my and his family are white. There were 2 moments that completely and utterly unsettled me about him and made me promise myself should my and I have children, he would not be left around him alone. Incident 1. He describes in detail how at his job, he cleans up apartments after a tenant is evicted, that he's tossing some stuff in a dumpster and sees a kitten with its head stomped in behind it. He's describing this in great detail and doing a shit job at trying to convince me that he knows he's been talking about it for a few minutes in detail, but he's not fascinated by it or anything. I politely nod, and for 10 minutes I slip away to do something else. Then he jogs up to me and tells me to check something out on his phone. It is a picture of said dead kitten with its head smashed in. I felt hysically ill for the next 30 minutes. Incident 2. This one scared the absolute shit out of me, and I felt like my life was in danger. Myso and his family and I are hanging out in the front lawn, relaxing. He yells to Myso, "Check out what I just bought," and proceeds to shoot nails from a nail gun at my boyfriend's feet. My boyfriend was legitimately scared, and I was telling him to stop, but he had this wild look in his eyes and a twitch in his hands that screamed that he wanted to just shoot a person's actual body. When I told him to stop, he aimed the gun at both of our bodies, and Myso was laughing, but very nervously, and it almost seemed like Myso and his mom had to talk him down, like they would a killer, to put the nail gun down. He just kept laughing about it. The guy is a recovered meth addict who has really turned his life around, makes more than average pay for someone with no college degree at a job he is really good at, has been clean for over a year, etc. He's nice enough to me, but I'm not completely convinced he won't fly off the handle and really hurt/kill someone one day. The worst part is that Myso's sense of danger towards him is shot because he grew up with him and his family has a real issue with denial that things are as bad as they are. When I get a better job, Myso is supposed to start going to therapy and we may try couples counseling again. I want to bring this up with him. Since that incident, and several with his narcissist sister, I've told him I refuse to go to any more family functions involving certain people. We've been together 2 years. I'm probably skipping Christmas this year in favor of volunteering, because I don't like being stressed out like that on anyone's behalf. This person had a history of violent psychotic behavior towards my family and others, but was able to gain sympathy. She was a sociopath, not a psychopath, though did suffer from many psychotic breaks. Details shortly. She used to be a friend of my family, but things grew sour, and she developed delusions that we had caused her mental illness. Many occasions I felt frightened to be alone in my house, for fear of her breaking in and killing me after this one particular incident that I will tell, and that she would get away with it, like she got away with everything. Trust me, there are many more stories I could tell, but the question was to ask for an incident that affected you solely. When I was 11 years old, I remember playing near her front door. I never used to do this, but thought it would be okay, that she's not crazy, just ill, and will get help. Also, this was virtually impossible to avoid, as I lived on a small street with terrace housing. One evening, she got really annoyed, more annoyed than usual, and began to scream out of her bedroom window at us. She kept telling us to move away from her door, but this time she kept saying that I was deliberately trying to annoy her, that I was out to get her, and that she will come out and fix it. So I stopped playing and remember being a little bit frightened because she just wouldn't let go of the situation. Backed away from her garden. I stood on the other side of the street, not sure what to do, couldn't play with my friends and my friends were growing frightened by her sudden erratic behavior. I kept thinking, why was she so particularly upset with just me? She let other kids hang around her house all the time. She kept telling me to stop playing near her house, even as I stood around 50 yards away by that point. She opened her front door, give me the football she ordered, and I saw that she was wielding a huge kitchen knife. I refused and began to walk further away. She came out into the street, give me the ball. I walked away faster, thinking that if she chases me, I can definitely outrun her, and I'm small too. She exploded into a sprint, knife in hand. I couldn't believe how fast she was. It frightened me that, just her speed. It was uncanny. I kept my distance, and she somehow kept up. She was deeply asthmatic. She chased me up the street, and I eventually kicked the ball out of my hands and into a person's garden, and I remember being baffled and in denial. She kept running towards me. I scaled a garden fence, and I hid in that hedge, listening to her wheezing with deep breaths for almost half an hour, until she gave up. Of course, nobody believed my story, and thought it couldn't possibly have happened where I live. Who would believe an 11-year-old anyway? Kids have wild imaginations. I've worked with folks on the psychopathy spectrum as well as a few who had antisocial personality disorder, commonly referred to as sociopaths, in my field of study over the last 10 years. Most were inmates in my state penitentiary, many of whom I formed tentative friendships with during and outside my work. TBH, most of the public confuse psychopaths with sociopaths, when the difference is pretty clear. We usually say that you'll know a sociopath when you meet him. I'm using him, since about 98% of people with ASPD are male, but you've probably met a dozen psychopaths in your life without a second thought. Of the people I've met, researched, formed friendships with, interviewed etc, the only ones that stand out as awkward were sociopaths. ASPD by definition causes them to behave, well, awkwardly. They have little to no empathy or morality, so their ability to read social cues like body language, tone of voice, or understand others' emotions are either very poor or non-existent. The most awkward was probably a guy with ASPD who I interviewed for my dissertation. He had more mild symptoms and was clearly trying very hard to appear normal, which was difficult for him to do, not to mention it made the interview process harder lol. He was just so focused on trying to behave like a normal social human being that it made me feel awkward, so the whole thing was weird and uncomfortable. That's not a very exciting story though. Sociopaths are in some ways harder to interact with because they infringe on the rights of others, usually in a violent or aggressive manner, but at least they're easy to read. In some ways, that conflict being awkward is distinctly human. Sociopaths are humans just like everyone else, just with a disorder that removes inhibitions and the ability to understand social consequences. Most research points to issues in brain development, specifically the prefrontal cortex. They represent all of the hidden urges we all have deep down to steal, hurt, or step on other people to get what we want. Most of us just know better than to act on them. Psychopaths, however, really aren't awkward in my experience. My interactions with them have either been extremely pleasant or extremely unsettling. It's almost like some key human element just isn't there. I don't know if it counts because we were so young, but I dated this girl when we were 13 to 14 for a few days under a year. She would frequently come up with scary hypothetical scenarios, what if I just hurt myself, things like that. One time, she was near some candles and a matchbox while we were video chatting. She said, what if I just burned myself, and kept hinting that she was going to do it. I freaked out so much. She hung up on me and texted me she was going to do it. Spoiler alert, she didn't. It gave me a panic attack when she said she did it on her left wrist. When I told her that self-harm was dangerous and I would call her parents, she started laughing at me for believing her and showed me her exposed arms, which weren't burnt whatsoever. This really scared me, so she backtracked and said she just wanted to see if I got scared because she didn't know if I cared about her. She told me she didn't care about people at all and couldn't care less if someone got hurt or died. I asked her if she felt that way about me too, and she vehemently denied it and cried. A few months before our relationship ended, she told me that almost all the time she cried were made up. I was an emotional person, and she was trying to mimic me to get me to show emotions like crying, anxiety, etc. She proceeded to show me how she fake cried and then instantly stopped crying and smiled. That was so scary. Told me I wasn't pretty, I was trying to get attention from boys if I wore makeup, and that I'd embarrass her if I tried out for a play or musical at our school. I don't know why I didn't realize it for so long, but the last straw was when I was hospitalized during a panic attack and the therapist called me psychotic and told me I needed to go to outpatient intensive care. It was just a panic attack, and a particularly mild one. I never exhibited symptoms of psychosis. This incident shook me up so much. I got home from the hospital at around 6 p.m. and I was hysterical. My parents were being very nice and telling me they'd put me on meds for anxiety if I wanted, but I wasn't crazy and maybe we can go to your favorite restaurant tonight. I initially agreed, but then my girlfriend kept spamming my phone. I told my parents that I couldn't. Girl got mad at me for not responding. I was so upset and frustrated due to the hospital incident, and the moment I told her, she suddenly got really calm and asked to hear about what happened in a creepy kind of way, and she seemed so interested and curious and excited. Next day I stayed home from school again, pretty hysterical. After school was over, she texted me, asked me to do her homework because she had severe ADD. She didn't. I did, and I was a terrible girlfriend if I didn't help her. I told her I couldn't because I wasn't mentally stable enough to do just about anything, and then she started hurling insults at me, then excuses, then apologies, then telling me I wish you cared about me. I shut my phone off for a few hours and screamed. I opened my phone up again to about 300 texts, and I didn't read them, and I just texted her fuck off and clarified that I was breaking up with her. That wasn't the last she manipulated me, and I was stupid enough to be friends after the breakup, but I started having rapid realizations after that this wasn't how I'm supposed to be treated, even if I was truly worthless. I limited contact in March of 2015 and cut her off around July. I had a best friend, her name was Crystal, and she was one of my best friends. Nothing in the world was weird about her when I met her. If anything, emotional dependency, but nothing I'd consider psychotic, though we were very close, like sister status. At the time she had a boyfriend who is also the father of her 2 kids. I wasn't particularly fond of him, but by all means was not abusive towards her and truly loved the kids. He did have some of my respect. Out of nowhere makes her move with their 2-year-old son while she was 8 months pregnant with their second son to Florida from Oregon. Quite a move out of nowhere. I was not happy she gave in, especially that far along, and it being a choice they made and did in 1 week. On and off in the 6 years that she was living there, I would hear from her and she would make it seem as though things were good, but also emotionally very bad. Lol, he was cheating and such. Many times I offered to come get her and she would blow me off. One time getting all the way to Texas via Greyhound, got stuck due to lost luggage, which at the time the story didn't make much sense, but I was not going to leave her there. I'd ask questions later, I thought. Told her I was driving G to her and would pay for her hotel until I arrived. About 2 hours on the road out of Oregon, she called and said she just went back to Florida. I was so pissed, but figured she was manipulated by the baby daddy. It was a little strange, but what could I do but turn around and go home? Eventually, out of nowhere, about a year later after this incident, she popped up back in town. No call telling me she was coming, nothing, but after she had arrived and been in town a whole week, finally called me saying she had just flown in. I was shocked, excited, ecstatic, and couldn't wait to see her. Forget all my other emotions I had, I just missed her and wanted to see her. I told her that I would do anything and everything possible to help her get a place, a car, a job, whatever. Found out she had left her boys with the baby daddy. I thought that was very strange as she's very attached to these boys. I figured I would find out more talking with her and that I would help her get a lawyer to get her boys. She was staying with me and my ex-husband at the time. About 2 weeks passed and little things started happening. Things randomly going missing. My 6-year-old daughter, at the time, showing up with bruises and being terrified of her, which really confused me when I was present. Crystal was her typical sweet innocent self. I couldn't understand why my kid was acting unsure of her. The bruises weren't extreme, and I thought it was my kid playing rough as kids do. Learning later my daughter was just plain scared of her. Before putting 2 and 2 together, one time when I was at work, she had snuck into the room while my husband was napping, cuddled up to him, and literally tried to sleep with him, and put her hands down his pants. He thought it was me first, and then woke up and saw her. She didn't stop and kept pushing him. I actually didn't believe my husband at first. Like maybe it was a misunderstanding, but he was so serious and upset I could not deny him. Confronting her about it was so shocking as she literally admitted it and said she would do it again. We should be a polygamy style couple. She literally felt entitled to sleep with my ex-husband because I was able to. Where this connection came from, IDK, literally from point A to point Z psycho. So I kick her out and decide I need to get the real story and answer. So I called her baby daddy, name is Carl, to see what was going on and what happened, why he kicked her out and would let her have the kids, before telling him what I had been experiencing. And honestly, what had happened was she had been psychologically losing her mind, doing mean things to the boys, like when cooking spaghetti one night, she took the metal spoon she was stirring with and hit her oldest son in the face because he said he wasn't hungry and left a first-degree burn on his cheek. He called the cops on her. They forced her into a facility as she was experiencing psychosis episodes and threatening harm. She got out by completion and things were fine for a bit, and then heinous evil acts became more frequent. One night she took a knife, or paring knife, and cut into her C-section scar trying to kill herself in front of the kids and Carl. He said it messed the boys up bad. He called the cops again. So all the times I couldn't get a hold of her for months at a time in Florida were because she was in mental ward being evaluated. She never once told me about it other than one time, and she made it seem like Cole was the villain. Then Carl told me the real story with the police reports and what Crystal had been screaming. She was admitted to a hospital for this many times apparently, and there was many other things she had done as well. That he told me about it and had the proof and records to back it up. She was basically kicked out of the home for being a danger to the children. He was awarded full custody because of her being a danger to herself as well. She hid all of this from me and tried to lie to me that she was completely normal. It wasn't until I started noticing the little things. But the sleeping with my husband act she tried, that when I started understanding who and what she really was, I was in denial. Couldn't believe I had made such a bad judge of character. I had always talked so highly of her. She was very important to me. I almost immediately cut off my friendship with her, which haunts me and it hurts. I love this girl very much. I wish I could have helped her, and still do. It's heartbreaking to see the actions and choices she's made, and refusing to get help. There are some serious psychological difficulties that she is going through, and it cost her the relationship between her and her sons, her best friend, who would have done anything for her, and very close family members of hers as well. It was a horrible situation to have happened, and I wish every day it never did, but it did. I wish I could have had a different outcome. I still feel blindsided. I hope she gets better. I pray for her every day. I do love her very much, and I think that's what hurts the most, is knowing I can't have that friendship with her because of how much of a dangerous person she is and the toxicities that she put out. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe the channel.